أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In the 20th juz of the Quran, in Surah Qasas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a very interesting story of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. But before he talks about him, this great prophet, he talks about his mother in quite some detail, which is unusual because in the Quran you don't get as much detail about the mother in the Quran itself. So Allah talks about the Musa, the mother of Musa, and as I was reading it yesterday, it made me reflect that the sacrifice a mother gave for her child, she risked her life, she had so much concern and worry and grief and anxiety over her son, who was still a baby and who had been born in a part of the world where children were being literally killed, infanticide as they call it in English. And she had this deep concern and worry for the tarbiyah of her son, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then blessed, protected. Allah through his wisdom and his hikmah made him such a person. And I think this is a really important connection between tarbiyah of your children and the potentiality that they can achieve if you give them the right tarbiyah and the concern and the fikr that you have. That the very son who was left by Allah's hukum, by Allah's order to trust in him and to put him in the river Nile, was the very son who later on saved an entire nation, saved an entire community, because we know in example of Musa that he crossed the sea, Allah protected Bani Israel, Allah saved Bani Israel from the clutches of Pharaoh. And last week I was in a masjid doing a bayan on the Trinity and Incarnation, and I talked about how that didn't happen in Christianity because the Christians, the early Christians, they were Jews at the time, they believed that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam would save them, but that didn't happen because that's a false belief that they had. But in the case of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah saved Musa and his qawm as well. So this is very, very important that in the Quran we see these really deep resonances, that if we give the tarbiyah to our children, we have fikr and concern for our children, our boys and our girls, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can, through that concern, through that worry, through that tarbiyah, make them people who literally save civilizations. And this is something that happened with Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And it's also interesting when you read the Quran very, very carefully, Allah, when he talks about children or prophets being given children or people being given children, he uses a very interesting verb, which is the verb wahab, wahabana, we gifted. So the Quran is telling us, Allah is telling us that having children is a gift. It's a cherished gift that Allah has given to you. There are many brothers and sisters who regularly text me, say, Maulana dua kadzo, make dua for me that we have children. Allah bless us with a second child, we're struggling. Having a child is a gift. In a modern world, child rearing is seen as a negative thing for the mother. The mother's meant to go to work, right? She's meant to work in a factory or an office, and she's not meant to be at home. Motherhood is something negative, and there's a big shift happening in that realm. But in the Quran, motherhood or being a mother or having children is a gift, as in the case of the mother of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And children are really a form of sadaqah. And this all goes back to a basic understanding in our deen, in our religion, as we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we do everything for the pleasure of Allah. The choices we make are based on the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there are consequences for us in the afterlife. And this is the radical difference between us and those people who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For them, this world is all there is. So this is it. Enjoy this world as much as you can. For us, it's radically different. Our bodies, for example, don't belong to us. Our bodies belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, we cannot do what we want with it. We can only do with it what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared for us to do with it. Can you see? This is a radical difference. In the modern world, it's about what one Christian author calls, Charles Taylor, expressive individualism. So we live in a world where it's all about me. You can do what you want with your body. It's your body. Change it how you want. Mutilate it how you want. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us something very different. The body doesn't belong to you, the body belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a trust. So having children is a gift. And the word in the Quran is very, very interesting. Wahaba. Wahab means to have a gift. And there's this idea, there's this concept in the Quran when you read it very, very carefully. Then you take a step back. about care, about protection, about guardianship. You are responsible as a parent for your child, their opportunities, their dreams and their hopes and their ambitions. And every parent wants the best for their son and their daughter as well. But the choices we make and the way we bring up our children affects our dunya, but also our akhirah. It affects how we live in this world and our end in the life to come as well. Now, this is very, very important. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ many places mentions that you are all responsible for things, and the father is responsible for his home, the family, the mother is responsible for her home and the family as well. So children are very, very important. Rasulullah ﷺ elsewhere connects neglect of the child with sin. So not being watchful of your children, not caring for them, not being concerned for them is also a sin. In fact, the Arabs used to have a phrase for children who are a coolness for their eyes, qurratul ayn. Allah make them a qurratul ayn for you. Allah make them a coolness for your eyes, a stillness, a calmness for you. This is the dua they would make for their children, that the children become a means of blessing and comfort for you as well. Of course, having children is not easy. Nobody's saying having children is an easy task, but it's a very rewarding task, and parents obviously need as much support and help. And I always say to parents, ask people who are older than you, learn from your elders, speak to people about how to bring up children in the best way possible, speak to the ulama and the mashayikh as well. So this is something very, very important. I go back to the same point that I mentioned in the beginning of Surah Qasas, that giving children the love and the care, the attention and the concern has a potentiality of you giving birth to children, bringing up children who will become leaders of tomorrow. Just like in the case of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his mother, the concern that she had. It's very, very interesting that Allah dedicates a couple of pages to the story of the mother of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. Then later Allah talks about this great prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam as well. So there's great resonances for us as we think about bringing up children in the modern age as well, and they go back to school next week as well, and these challenges that we have to think about. Some of the practical steps, and every family is obviously very, very different. They have their own dynamics that takes place. Anyone that's had children will know that when you have one child and then the second one comes, the dynamics completely change in the home. And then you have a third child, is it a boy, is it a girl? The dynamics are always fluid and changing as well. But there are certain things that we can do as parents, including myself first and foremost, to make sure that we have the greatest opportunities for our children to succeed. One of them just starts with the basics that I always tell people is to model parenting and growing up for your children. Don't just tell your children what to do. Show to them what it means to be a father. Show to them what it means to be a mother, right? It's all good, telling them that this is how you should behave. Actually model it for them. Let them observe it in the kitchen. Let them observe it throughout the house. How are you with your wife? How is your wife with you? How do you talk to each other? How do you interact with each other? Because they will then learn as they get older, oh, this is what it means to be a mother. This is what it means to be a father. Right? So this is very, very important that we model it as much as we can. We become exemplary people. We actually show our children how it's done. Right? And that's very, very, very important. That's more powerful than simply teaching them a bunch of rules. Right? I mean, that happens in the madrasa, mashallah, but what happens in the home is the real madrasa. The madrasa is really at home, if you ask me. The real teaching, education takes place in the confines of your personal space of your home. So that's very, very important. Spend some time with your children. I know we're all busy. Many of us have to work in the morning, leave for work in the morning, afternoon, evening. We're all busy. But try and dedicate maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes with your son or your daughter where you read a book with them. Any book. Just go to Waterstones and pick up a book on fiction. Whatever. Pick up a good book. Ask some ulama, ask anyone. Get a good book and sit down with your children, read a book with them. Have a conversation with them. Get interested in life. When they're doing their homework, sit with them. Don't just say to them, do your homework. When it's done, then you can play outside. Sit with them. Take an interest in what they're doing. Take an interest in their lives. Right? Often we don't even know what our children are learning in madrasa. We don't know what they're learning at school. Keeping ta'alluq with your asatiza, with your teachers, sending them an email just to say before the Christmas holidays, thank you very much. We appreciate what you did for our son or our daughter. How many of us even bother to do that for the teachers? Just to send them an email, just to send them a gift to say, look, we know that you're working under extreme circumstances, there's a lot of pressure, there's Ofsted. We appreciate what you do for our son and our child. So having an interest in your child's life is very, very important. And you'll realize straight away that they'll start responding. Before they go to bed, sit down with them, read a book with them, spend some time with them, right? That's very, very important. Bond with them. In the olden days, it was very different. My father was very different to the way I bring up my children today, because my father was the stick, That's it, nothing else. But nowadays children need a different type of care. And that's very, very important to bear in mind as well. And when you go out with them, take them with you, go out places, explore the world with them. And so have an interest in their lives, they'll have an interest in your lives. Tell them about what you do. What do you do at work? What's your life like, right? So they get to understand what it's like growing up as a child as well. The final thing I really want to mention as well is ta'aleem. I've mentioned this before many, many times, and I've been trying it myself at home, is that every home should have some sort of moment or time or space where you just spend 5-10 minutes with your son, with your children, or your daughter, or your family. You just sit around on the floor somewhere comfortable, and you read a book together. A book on hadith, Quran, fiqh, whatever it may be. Something that you can just read. But it's not just reading that's important, not reading passages, it's the discussion that takes place. So you might read something, then have a discussion with them about it. You don't have to finish the book. Everybody thinks that you have to finish the book in a week or two. No, have a conversation with your child about it. And if you don't understand, and lots of time my children, because children are innocent, they're not corrupted by the world yet, right, when they're young, they'll ask you very, very interesting questions that you would have never have thought about, right? And they'll ask you these really interesting questions. And you can say to them, that's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to go and ask someone. I'm going to try and find out for you. What you're teaching your child then is good to ask questions. It's good to have an inquisitive mind, and it's okay to not know the answer as well, because my parents are saying that as well. And it's okay then to try and find out the answer, because all of us nowadays, we get everything on a plate. We're not really taught to think for ourselves, really to kind of get into the depths of things. So this is something very, very important that you can teach your child. And you'll find that even when you're driving a car, you can have these conversations. Children will ask really interesting questions because they're pure, right? Because they haven't been influenced by the world as much as we have been by now. So that's very, very important to bear in mind. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our children, make them really coolness for our eyes. When we die, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that one of the 3 things that you leave behind is waladun salih, pious children. That they will make dua for you, yad'u lahum, they'll make dua for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. All of us have challenges when it comes to parenting in different ways, and we should try and support one another. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect and bless all of us, inshallah.